"Hey, look at that, Halloween's not for months, old-timer." Laughter echoed throughout Rosy's diner. "Check out that filthy uniform." Another added. The veterans in the diner sat motionless, a solitary figure amid the jeers. Then, engines rumbled outside. A Navy SEAL SUV pulled up. Doors swung open, and 6 warriors stepped inside, walking straight toward him in stunned silence. Type 1 if you believe silence is sometimes stronger than 1,000 words. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows of Rosy's diner as Charles Mallister carefully eased his aching body into a corner booth. At 74, the former Marine moved with the deliberate care of a man whose joints had endured more hardship than most. His withered hands, marked with age spots and old scars, trembled slightly as he removed his cover and placed it on the seat beside him. Today had been long but satisfying. The Veterans Charity event at Hopewell Park needed volunteers for setup, and Charlie had spent hours hammering tent stakes into hard ground, carrying boxes of supplies, and arranging chairs for tomorrow's ceremony. His once crisp Marine dress uniform, the same one he'd worn proudly across 3 continents decades ago, now bore the honest dirt and sweat of the day's labor. Charlie didn't mind. The uniform had seen worse in its time: jungle mud, desert sand, the blood of friends. A little honest dirt from helping fellow veterans seemed fitting somehow. Rosy's was unusually busy for a Thursday. The dinner crowd had arrived early, filling the small-town diner with the comfortable sounds of conversation and clattering dishes. Charlie nodded politely to Mrs. Henderson from the library and young Pastor Wilson from First Baptist as they passed his booth. Both returned small, distracted smiles before continuing their conversations. "Coffee, black," Charlie told Anna, the middle-aged waitress who appeared at his table with practiced efficiency. "Coming right up, Mr. Mallister," she replied, her eyes warming with genuine recognition. Something in her expression suggested more than casual familiarity, though Charlie couldn't quite place her face among the thousands he'd encountered throughout his long life. The bell above the door jangled as a group of 5 young men entered. Leather jackets gleaming with unnecessary zippers, sunglasses perched atop carefully styled hair despite the fading daylight outside. They claimed a large table near the center of the diner, their voices pitched deliberately louder than necessary, as if demanding the room acknowledge their presence. Charlie paid them little mind, focusing instead on the simple pleasure of hot coffee after a day of physical labor. His hands curled gratefully around the warm mug Anna delivered. The loudest of the young men, a tall fellow with a shock of bleached hair and an elaborate throat tattoo, spotted Charlie in his dirt-smudged uniform. He nudged his companions, jerking his chin in Charlie's direction. "Hey, look at that, Halloween's not for months, old-timer," he called across the diner, his voice cutting through conversations. Several diners glanced up, then quickly back to their meals, unwilling to get involved but equally unwilling to stand against the brewing confrontation. "Check out that filthy uniform," another added, emboldened by his friend's example. "What did you do, roll around in the pigpen before coming to dinner?" Laughter rippled through their group. One of them crumpled a sugar packet and flicked it toward Charlie's table, where it landed beside his coffee cup. Charlie didn't respond. His expression remained neutral, decades of military discipline evident in his composure. Only the slight tightening of his grip on the coffee mug betrayed any reaction to the juvenile taunting. Anna emerged from the kitchen, her face clouding as she assessed the situation. Her eyes met Charlie's briefly, an unspoken question about whether he wanted intervention. Charlie gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. He'd weathered far worse than teenage disrespect. The young men, disappointed by Charlie's non-reaction, escalated their behavior. One pretended to cough while passing Charlie's table, deliberately jostling his elbow and causing coffee to slosh onto the worn tablecloth. "Sorry, Grandpa," he sneered. "Not sorry at all. Didn't see you there." Throughout the diner, patrons shifted uncomfortably. A few frowned in disapproval, but none spoke up. The silent complicity of the crowd seemed to embolden the young tormentors further. In the kitchen doorway, Anna's face tightened with resolve. She caught the eye of Miguel, the burly head cook, and nodded once. Miguel glanced at Charlie, then back to Anna, understanding passing between them without a word. He removed his apron and stepped into the back office, closing the door behind him. No one noticed the faded Navy SEAL tattoo visible on his forearm as he reached for his phone. The harassment continued with increasing. "What's with the medals, old man?" the leader called out, noticing the ribbons and pins on Charlie's chest. "You buy those at a costume shop?" Charlie's hand unconsciously moved to touch the purple heart pinned to his uniform, awarded after taking shrapnel during a rescue operation that had cost 3 of his unit members their lives. The memory flickered behind his eyes, the ambush near Danang, the desperate firefight, carrying his wounded radio operator through jungle so thick it seemed alive. "For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." In the kitchen, Anna watched through the service window, her hands clenched in helpless frustration. She approached Miguel, who had returned from the office. "Did you reach them?" she whispered urgently. Miguel nodded. 2 hours. That's the soonest they can be here. He saved my entire family during Katrina, Anna said softly, watching Charlie through the window. The floodwaters were rising so fast, our roof was the only part above water. He appeared out of nowhere in that little boat, pulled all 7 of us to safety before the house collapsed completely. Miguel's expression softened. "I didn't know that was him. He wouldn't want you to know. He never talks about it." Anna wiped away an unexpected tear. "If it weren't for him, my children wouldn't be alive today." The diner's front door opened again, admitting an elderly couple who immediately sensed the uncomfortable atmosphere. The husband, wearing a Korean War veteran's cap, took in the situation with a glance. His jaw tightened as he observed Charlie's isolation and the young man's behavior. "Maybe we should try somewhere else," his wife murmured, tugging gently at his sleeve. "No," he replied firmly. "I'm not leaving a brother alone." The couple deliberately chose a table near Charlie, the husband nodding respectfully as they passed. Charlie returned the gesture, a flash of recognition passing between the 2 veterans, members of a brotherhood forged in experiences most civilians could never comprehend. This silent exchange didn't go unnoticed by the troublemakers. "Look, it's a reunion of the Dinosaur Club," the leader called out, encouraged by scattered nervous laughter from other patrons. The Korean War veteran started to rise, anger flashing in his eyes, but Charlie caught his gaze and shook his head slightly. The older man subsided reluctantly, honoring Charlie's unspoken request. Through it all, Charlie remained composed, his withered hand steady as he methodically added cream to his second cup of coffee. His apparent indifference seemed to only frustrate his tormentors further. "I bet that uniform isn't even real," one of them suggested. "Probably bought it at a surplus store to get free meals on Veterans Day." Another stood, feigning exaggerated old man movements as he shuffled past Charlie's table. "Thank you for your service," he mocked in a quavering voice before rejoining his friends in raucous laughter. What the young men couldn't see, what was hidden beneath Charlie's composed exterior, was the lifetime of service that had shaped him. They couldn't see the night he'd spent maintaining a pressure bandage on a fellow Marine's severed artery during a monsoon in Vietnam. They couldn't see him carrying exhausted refugees across the Persian Gulf during Operation Desert Storm. They couldn't see the civilian rescue operations he'd volunteered for during natural disasters long after his official service had ended. Most importantly, they couldn't see the classified operations that had earned him commendations still locked in Pentagon files, missions alongside Special Forces units that officially never happened. In countries where American troops officially never went. In the back office, Miguel was speaking urgently into his phone, his voice low but intense. "Yes, sir. Rosy's diner on Highway 16. That's correct. He's in his original dress uniform. They've been at it for almost an hour now." "No, sir, he hasn't said a word to them." "Yes, sir, we'll make sure he's still here." As Miguel returned to the kitchen, he exchanged a knowing glance with Anna. "They're coming," he confirmed. "All of them?" she asked, surprise evident in her voice. Miguel nodded, a grim satisfaction in his expression. All of them. Out in the dining area, the leader of the young men had grown increasingly frustrated by Charlie's continued stoicism. He approached Charlie's table directly, standing over the seated veteran with practiced intimidation. "Hey, I'm talking to you, old man," he said, his voice dropping to a menacing register. "Didn't they teach you to respect your betters in the military?" For the first time, Charlie looked directly at his tormentor. He said nothing, but something in his gaze, the thousand-yard stare familiar to anyone who had seen genuine combat, caused the young man to step back involuntarily. Recovering quickly, the youth grabbed a glass of ice water from a nearby table and held it threateningly. "Maybe this will wash some of that dirt off your costume." A tense silence fell over the diner. Patrons froze mid-bite, conversations halted, even the clatter of kitchen noise seemed to pause. The moment balanced on a knife's edge of potential violence. Then, from outside, the distinctive sound of heavy engines broke the silence, multiple vehicles pulling up, doors opening and closing with military precision, heavy boots on pavement moving with purpose. The young man's hand, still holding the water glass he'd threatened to dump on Charlie, faltered. Something in the sudden silence of the diner, the collective intake of breath, the shifting of bodies toward the windows, triggered an instinctive warning in his brain. The bell above the diner door rang with decisive clarity. If you believe these touching stories of silent dignity deserve to be remembered, please stay with us. The diner's door swung open with deliberate control. 6 men entered in perfect formation, their movements synchronized with the unconscious coordination of those who had trained and served together for years. They wore the distinctive combat uniforms of Navy SEALs, not the ceremonial dress blues of formal occasions, but the practical battle dress of operators prepared for action. Conversations died instantly. Forks paused midway to mouths. The cook, who had been about to ring the service bell, froze with his hand extended. Even the ceiling fan seemed to slow its rotation, as if the very air recognized the gravity entering the room. The lead officer, a lean, hard-faced lieutenant commander with the name Manson emblazoned on his uniform, surveyed the diner with a single sweeping glance, his eyes cataloging exits, positions, and potential threats with professional efficiency. Behind him, 5 equally formidable operators maintained perfect formation, their collective presence commanding the room without a single word being spoken. The young tormentors stood frozen, recognition dawning in their expressions. The leader, still holding the water glass, found himself unable to move as Lieutenant Commander Derek Manson's gaze locked onto him. "Put that down," each word emerged precisely, carrying the unmistakable expectation of immediate compliance. The glass was hastily returned to the table, water sloshing over its rim with the young man's shaking hand. Manson and his team moved forward with purpose, ignoring the stunned onlookers as they approached Charlie's table. Charlie had made no move to acknowledge their entrance, continuing to sit quietly with his coffee mug held between weathered hands. The 6 SEALs halted precisely in front of his booth. As one, they snapped to attention and rendered a formal military salute, a gesture of profound respect rarely seen outside of official ceremonies. "Gunnery Sergeant Mallister," Manson said, his voice pitched to carry throughout the silent diner. "The United States Navy SEALs present our respect, sir. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much." Charlie looked up slowly, his eyes moving from face to face, recognition flickering in his expression. After a moment's hesitation, he set down his coffee and returned their salute with perfect military precision, his aged hand steady and true. "Lieutenant Commander," Charlie acknowledged, his voice gravelly with age but carrying the unmistakable tone of command that never truly leaves those who have held responsibility for others in combat. "This is unexpected." "Not as unexpected as finding you here, Gunny," Manson replied, a hint of warmth breaking through his professional demeanor. "When we received word you were in town, we had to come pay our respects." The young troublemakers had begun to edge toward the door, sensing an opportunity to escape during this exchange. Without turning his head, One of the SEALs, a broad-shouldered chief petty officer with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, shifted his position slightly to block their retreat. "Going somewhere?" he asked quietly, the soft question somehow more intimidating than any shout could have been. The young man froze again, trapped between the exit and the silent disapproval radiating from the special operators. Lieutenant Commander Manson turned to face them directly, his expression neutral yet somehow more threatening for its lack of visible emotion. "That uniform you've been mocking," he said, each word precisely measured, "has seen more courage and sacrifice than you will likely witness in your entire lives." He gestured toward Charlie, who remained seated, his composure unbroken. Gunnery Sergeant Charles Mallister served 3 tours in Vietnam, specializing in reconnaissance and rescue operations. After that, he volunteered everything for this country and received too little in return. The diner remained utterly silent, many patrons now looking down at their plates in shame. "But that's not why we're here," Manson continued. He nodded to one of his team, who produced a small wooden box from a tactical pouch and handed it to his commander. Manson turned back to Charlie. "Gunnery Sergeant Mallister, 30 years ago, your actions during Operation Urgent Fury remained classified. Today, I'm authorized to inform you that those records have been declassified." Charlie's expression changed subtly, a flicker of surprise quickly contained. "The night of October 25, 1983, when our team was pinned down under heavy fire with multiple casualties, conventional wisdom said no rescue was possible until daylight," Manson continued. He opened the box, revealing a medal gleaming against dark velvet. "You disagreed with that assessment." A murmur rippled through the diner as Manson continued. "You commandeered a vehicle, drove through active combat zones, and extracted our entire team, carrying 2 wounded operators on your back when the vehicle couldn't get closer to our position." Charlie's eyes had drifted to the middle distance, seeing not the diner but the night in question, the desperate firefight, the smell of cordite, the weight of wounded men across his shoulders. "3 of the men you saved that night are in this room," Manson said softly. "I was one of them." He held out the box containing the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration awarded for valor in combat, exceeded only by the Medal of Honor. "On behalf of the Secretary of the Navy, the first present you with the Navy Cross for extraordinary heroism and uncommon valor in the face of danger." The diner erupted in spontaneous applause, tentative at first, then building to a thunderous acknowledgement. Several patrons, including the Korean War veteran and his wife, had risen to their feet in respect. The young troublemakers stood rigid, their faces drained of color as the magnitude of their misjudgment became clear. The leader, the one who had been most vocal in his mockery, looked physically ill. Anna emerged from the kitchen, tears streaming unashamedly down her face. "He saved my family too," she announced to the room at large. "During Hurricane Katrina, our house was flooding, and he appeared in a little boat, pulled all 7 of us to safety just before our roof collapsed." Others in the diner began sharing similar stories. A young woman whose grandfather had been extracted from a collapsed building by Charlie during an earthquake response. An elderly man whose son had served under Charlie in Desert Storm and returned home safely because of his leadership. With each story, the collective shame in the diner deepened. What they had witnessed and tacitly permitted through their silence was the humiliation of a man who had repeatedly put himself in harm's way to save others. Charlie accepted the Navy Cross with simple dignity, neither gloating over his tormentors nor seeking additional recognition from the suddenly adoring crowd. When he finally spoke, his voice carried easily through the hushed diner. "The greatest privilege of my life," he said, "has been serving alongside men and women of uncommon courage and compassion. This medal honors them more than me." He looked directly at the young men who had mocked him. "We didn't serve so that you would thank us. We served so that you would have the freedom to become whoever you choose to be." He paused, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "Choose wisely." The leader of the group stepped forward hesitantly, shame evident in every line of his body. "Sir. We didn't know." "That's the point, son," Charlie replied quietly. "Most of the time, you don't know who's sitting across from you or what battles they've fought. A little kindness costs nothing but means everything." The young man nodded, unable to hold Charlie's steady gaze. Lieutenant Commander Manson checked his watch. "Gunnery Sergeant, if you're finished with your coffee, we have transportation waiting. The secretary would like to speak with you personally before tomorrow's ceremony." Charlie rose slowly, placing money on the table for his coffee. The SEAL team formed an honor guard around him as he walked toward the door, patrons standing respectfully as he passed. At the threshold, Charlie paused, turning back to the diner full of people who had witnessed his humiliation and now stood in his honor. He offered no grand statement, no cutting remark to those who had mocked him. Instead, he simply nodded once, acknowledging their presence as fellow humans, and walked out into the evening air with the quiet dignity that had defined his entire life. Have you ever misjudged someone only to discover an extraordinary story behind their ordinary appearance? How did it change you? By morning, the story had spread through Hopewell like wildfire. Social media amplified what dozens of witnesses had seen firsthand at Rosy's diner, transforming a local incident into a viral phenomenon that reached far beyond the small town's boundaries. Captured on patrons' phones showed the SEAL team's arrival and Charlie's dignified response, garnering millions of views overnight. The Veterans Charity event, which Charlie had been helping to set up when his uniform became soiled, saw unprecedented attendance. People lined up for blocks, many bringing additional donations and offering volunteer services. What had been planned as a modest local gathering became a profound community celebration of service and sacrifice. Charlie, true to his nature, attempted to avoid the spotlight, focusing instead on ensuring that homeless veterans received the support they needed. But his presence drew respectful attention wherever he went, with people stepping aside to let him pass and parents quietly pointing him out to their children. The young men who had mocked him made their own unexpected contribution to the day. They arrived early, before most volunteers, and approached Charlie with evident trepidation. "We came to help," their leader said simply, unable to meet Charlie's eyes directly. "If you'll have us." Charlie studied them briefly before nodding. "Extra hands are always welcome. The heavy equipment needs unloading over there." Throughout the morning, the young men worked tirelessly, carrying tables, erecting tents, distributing literature, their previous arrogance replaced by genuine humility. They asked no special forgiveness, sought no public redemption. They simply served, learning through action what words could never adequately convey. For you, a free like is easy. But for me, it is the greatest support and encouragement. For this video, can you give me 1 like and 1 subscription? Thank you very much. By late afternoon, as the event wound down, the transformation of Hopewell was evident in more than just the successful fundraiser. Something fundamental had shifted in the community's consciousness, a renewed awareness of the quiet heroes walking among them, the veterans whose sacrifices remained largely untold and unacknowledged in daily life. A week later, a small ceremony took place outside Rosy's diner, without fanfare or press coverage. The owner unveiled a simple bronze plaque beside the entrance. It read, "Reserved seating for those who never left anyone behind. In honor of Gunnery Sergeant Charles Mallister and all who serve." A booth near the window, Charlie's booth, was designated as a permanent memorial, available for any veteran to use at any time. The first to sit there with quiet respect was the Korean War veteran who had witnessed Charlie's humiliation and vowed it would never happen again. Charlie himself returned to his modest routine, tending his small garden, volunteering at the VA hospital, and occasionally visiting Rosy's for his afternoon coffee. The only visible change was the respectful treatment he now received everywhere in town, not the exaggerated deference of guilt, but the genuine respect of a community that had finally recognized the hero in their midst. The young men who had tormented him became unexpected advocates, using their experience as a cautionary tale when speaking to student groups about respect and judgment. They never mentioned their own role directly, but their message was clear: extraordinary people often walk among us unrecognized. One quiet evening, they left a handwritten note at Charlie's reserved booth, along with a carefully folded American flag in a display case. "We were wrong. Thank you for showing us a better way to be men." Charlie kept the note but donated the flag to the local high school, where it was displayed prominently with a simple inscription, "Freedom stands on the shoulders of quiet sacrifice." In his small home at the edge of town, Charlie continued to live simply, his Navy Cross stored in a drawer rather than displayed. When a neighborhood child asked him why he didn't show off his medals, Charlie's answer captured the essence of his lifelong service: "The medal isn't the point, young man. The people who came home because of what we did, they're the point." These touching stories, silent and enduring, are what keep this world from falling apart. Have you ever seen an ordinary person carrying an extraordinary story? Share that story so respect never fades away. Subscribe to Talus Strength so YouTube can remind you daily of touching stories and veteran stories that never dim.